Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lesson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we're here today with our very special guests, Tracy Elise and DeAnna Bennett, and we're going to let them introduce themselves because I don't have their bios in front of me. Dr. Lesson, are you there, and would you like to say something before we bring on Tracy and DeAnna?
Yes, I would. A few years back, Jan and I had the honor of being able to teach Tantra and basically the all-chakra spiritual tradition at the Phoenix Goddess Temple, and it was utterly wonderful. There was a place where people were able to really experience the love of the goddess in a really safe and uplifting way, and it's just absolutely a wonderful experience. And we're going to listen today about what happened to this wonderful temple and how ultimately it prevailed. And Tracy has isolated the core of most important religious traditions, spiritual traditions, which is the chakra system, the energies within each body and within the whole planet. And DeAnna is a very, very special person who has attended our Tantra school and has been studying with Tracy, and she has incredibly wonderful things to add. You're going to love today's program.
Right, and we're going to talk about what it takes to live an authentic life. And I think we're getting some feedback. So, David, we're getting feedback. Yeah, really bad. Okay, with that, we're working on that. Sorry for the technical things going on here. First, we're going to bring on Tracy Elise. You're going to have to shut that off. We're getting too much feedback. Yeah, we're getting feedback from that, okay? All right. Tracy, are you there?
Yes, hi. I am, Janet. Good evening.
Well,
good evening, DeAnna. Good evening, Sasha. Yes.
Hey, Tracy.
Hi, we are here. We are here. Just like the Horton Hears a Who. We are here. We are here.
Tracy, can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are? Since I don't have a bio to read about you, if you could tell our audience, who are you in this moment, in this now?
Who I am in this moment. Thank you. Well, gosh, that's always a good question. In this moment, I am really focused on the leading edge of human beings experiencing light and energy in their body. I've been doing tantric healing work for 14 years as my right livelihood, and since 1995 in my personal life. And I've had the pleasure of working with many of the leading sacred sexuality teachers. I haven't studied with everybody, but I've met them at the international conferences, listened to their talks. So there's a lot of cool ideas floating about Tantra. The one that I've been focusing on for over a decade has to do with the chakras, the energy systems that refer to the channels of flow of energy going in and energy going out. So that's who I am. I'm focused on energy and light. And I love the peace that it brings when we feel our way into energy and light. Is that a good answer? I don't know. It's not a political answer, but it's what I'm enjoying right now. So.
And DeAnna, do you want to give our listeners an idea of who you are? And we're focused on living an authentic life, and so that's the theme lately, is how can we really be who we are in our walk in the world? I'm still getting a lot of feedback. Anyway, go ahead, DeAnna. Maybe there will be some feedback with you. Go ahead and speak.
Sure. So my name is DeAnna. I'm getting feedback too, but hopefully you aren't getting it out there.
I think, David, you're going to have to quit whatever you're doing. We're getting horrible feedback. I'm sorry. Okay. Keep that stuff.
So
okay,
anyway,
yeah.
No? I'm getting an echo, but I'll just ignore it. Anyway, so my story actually starts out a long time ago, but just to make a long story short, I've always identified in my life early on as being transgendered and knew it, but was afraid to bring it out. And mainly because I didn't know what it was most of my life. But I guess the critical point in my life came, I was a captain in the Army, the U.S. Army, and stationed in Iraq during the first Desert Storm. And I had a huge vision that I was living the wrong life. And what became very clear to me and what I made an agreement with in my own head was that I was going to get to the right life if I survived. And so I did survive, and that began about a 10-year process of transitioning my gender and stepping into being a woman. And so about 10 years after I got out of the Army, I actually went full-time, transitioning what we call in the transgendered world, and I actually had surgeries and everything else. And about 2004, got involved with a man who's also in the Army, and we had an ongoing relationship. But he ended up committing suicide, and he left me a lot of money, which actually took me to a life coaching school. And at the life coaching school, the very first day I was there, I met a woman who I had a magnetic connection like I have never helped before. And I didn't know what it was. I always like to say I wanted to hit her, and I wanted to, to have her up against the wall, so to speak. Anyway, very strange reaction. I didn't know what she was, and I wanted to find out. So I began to find out. She was a Tantra practitioner, and I had never heard the word Tantra before. And so that began me on this long journey of trying to discover what Tantra was, because when I heard the word, it echoed in my soul. It just literally echoed in my soul. It just seemed like this is who I was. And that took me on the road to Janet and Sasha out in Hawaii. And it's funny, Sasha at one time said, I am the embodiment of Tantra because of the many times we talk about Tantra as this balance of male and masculine and feminine energy. And I had lived that in my entire life. And it was personified inside myself. So instinctively, I seemed to understand that push and pull and the confluence and the balance of male-female energy. Anyway, I began training with Sasha and Janet. I did several other things with them, including polyamory conference and things like that. But then I got involved with Tracy's temple here in Phoenix, and I really felt like I'd come home. I mean, I began to go through a priestess path. She asked me at one point, did I want to become a practitioner? And without even thinking about it, I said, I'm pretty sure I do. Yes, I do. And I began to train with her, and then the temple was raided. And it began a long, long journey of getting over my fear of the way society perceives Tantra. And at this point in my history, I've actually begun practicing, not here in Arizona, but in other places, and really happy and feel like finally I'm on the path of where I'm supposed to be in my life. So it's been an amazing journey, and I'm finally feeling like I'm in the right place and in the right space. So I guess that's about where I'm at right now.
Oh, thank you. You know, it would really help if Tracy would say your background and what led you to create the temple and just what happened. What is the background of this wonderful temple?
We lost Tracy. We lost Tracy for a moment. She's calling back into the show. But just hold on to that. I wanted to ask DeAnna a couple questions, or I just wanted to make a comment. One thing, that what's going on with you, DeAnna, is so relevant right now. We have Bruce Jenner. We see celebrities are coming out about being transgendered, and Bruce Jenner is leading the way on a celebrity level, and
Right,
also
the Amazon.
The Amazon.com show called Transparent, which is a very clever name, just won 2 Emmy Awards. The Emmy Awards are just pretty recent. So you've been watching this all of your life. What would you like to say about the movement and how things are rapidly changing?
It is really it's stunning to watch, and there are really some really good things about it, but there I tend to be too I don't want to be too like everything's rosy, because there are things going on right now that there are pushbacks right now in society, as much as it's one of the biggest concerns right now is that some big names in Hollywood and also on shows are doing something that's not uncommon. But when the DSM-4, which is the medical category, how the medical field categorized different things, in the earlier version of the DSM, which is the medical book that people use to diagnose from, being transgendered was categorized in a list of things which no one really knew what they were at the time, back in the early 60s and 70s. And so, for whatever reason, pedophilia and transgenderism were in the same chapter. And the new DSM that's come out has actually given transgenderism its own category, separate from everything else. But because of that earlier grouping with pedophilia, there are people in mainstream media who are saying, like, all transgendered people are pedophiles. So it's fascinating to watch how people make these bizarre leaps, and connections, just because something happens to exist in a chapter of, here's what we're still confused about, and we don't really know what it is and what causes it. So, but there is a lot of positive stuff. So,
what's interesting to note, and I've been studying this, I always go to YouTube, and I study this, and I am not an expert by any means, but there's something that happens in the womb that determines gender, and everybody comes in female for like the first 3 months, if I'm getting this correctly. I don't know if you understand this.
No, this is correct.
And then it's based on things like environmental factors and testosterone, and how things are going with the mother.
Right.
Do you understand? And then it changes, and some of the babies become male. Do you have more to add to that? What
happens? There's so many things. It's a kind of an interesting thing, because so many things can actually go wrong, but it's a miracle as many don't go wrong. So what happens in the womb, because you're right, all eggs start out the exact same way as female, but what happens, there are I think 3 or 4 testosterone washes that happen in the brain of a male baby. And so if any of those washes are not at the exact right time, or if they don't happen, all kinds of things can happen. They think there's speculation. They don't know anything for absolute certain yet. But what they're finding is one of the conditions that happen is that you become transgendered. Or maybe gay is another one of the different things that happen. But it's very important to note that gay and transgendered are very different things, and that's why I've always preferred the word transgender to the word transsexual, because transsexual always adds a weird twist, and people start thinking that being transsexual is a sexual issue, and when in fact we know that being transgendered has nothing to do with sexuality. It's a separate issue, completely different from the gender issue. We know that transgender people end up being all spectrums. They tend to be, depending on which way they go, like a male to female can end up being a lesbian, or can be bisexual, like in my case. And I tend to be more gender fluid. And to me, it's about energy and energetically who someone is. Their parts do not really matter to me so much as of who they are, right? The plumbing doesn't matter as much as who they are, and I've been with both men and women, and really it's really irrelevant to me at certain points. So, but I think it's just really important.
And I wanted to, before I forget, to add to the conversation that and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but there's a great percentage of children that are born, and I don't have the right term, so I'm going to be politically incorrect here. They used to call it hermaphrodites, but they have both male and female. Some of them have internal, some external genitalia, and now we're doing the genetic tests, and some of them are there's XX, XY, XXY, and XYY. So we actually probably have 4 genders now, and our whole society has to rethink that.
Oh, I think 4 is
4 genders at a minimum.
It's way more complicated than that, and it's really it's bizarre to even try and categorize it into 4 genders, because I know there was a case in Texas where a woman had been married to a man for 20 years, and Texas passed a law about chromosomes, and the woman had 4 babies, and because she had an XXY chromosome, she was actually decided she was a guy, and her marriage was annulled because of it. It's the bizarrest stuff that happens when you try to fit everything into a category. And so it's such a fluid thing. And the correct term is actually intersex would be the word today, because it's very rare. I-N-T-E-R, intersex? Right, intersex, because it's very common for hermaphrodites do exist. They're actually a real phenomena, but they're kind of rare, whereas intersex is much, much more common. And intersex is where you may have a girl with a testicle, or you might have a woman with, like a pseudo penis, or you might have a guy with a boob, with one breast, or so it's just, these are incredibly common, and it's very, very. I knew a transgender woman who actually she was in the Air Force, and she grew one breast, and she knew she was transgendered, but she had a breast reduction because of that. And then she ended up transitioning, and then her other breast came in, but now she did. So it's just interesting what happens out there in the real world. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of pictures, just slideshows, of people who have all different kinds of things. I mean, I knew a kid in a church who was born with a penis and a vagina. And so what happened was they sewed up the vagina. They made an arbitrary decision. Because normally they're doing a way better job with this now, but at certain points they would typically err on the side of male. They would pick male if there was any confusion.
Well, people want sons more than daughters, so they're
that's right.
The scales towards
there's
male.
A heavy leaning toward masculine, in our society.
Can I insert something? Because everybody that's listening.
Oh, she's back.
Oh, hey. No, I'm listening. It's really great to hear you talk about all this, DeAnna, because when you say we could do without the labels, my sister is the same thing. Do without the labels. But labels make it easy. Labels make it lazier. You don't have to be as engaged and use a label with somebody. Then you can, so. But I was going to say something that I experienced the other day, and I was on what was it? It was a government website, and I was entering my information, and at the top it had title. And everybody listening, you'll see this. There'll be a form, and it'll say Mr. MR period. Then it'll say Mrs. Then it'll say Miss. Then it'll say Ms. And then sometimes at the bottom it'll say Doctor or Reverend. But what's interesting when you really look at it, mostly they just say Mr., Mrs., Miss, and Ms., MS. And I think it's fascinating that our society, and you literally couldn't submit the form, notice the word submit, you couldn't send the form in without clearing your energetic or physical orientation. So it's like for the guys, they just get to exist with their outward flow. So all guys mark the category Mr. And then the women have to pick between, I'm with a guy, I'm a Mrs., I'm single but looking, I'm a Miss, and I'm a ball-busting bitch because I'm a Ms., an MS. But it's weird. You have to literally put your orientation to the male inside the form. And so there's lots of weird little funky, I think, energetic things that are in our culture that we're not paying attention to. And I think it's eventually we're going to, as a species, we're going to go from being 5 senses humans to being 6 sense humans. And once we become aware that we're energy humans, then someone like DeAnna, who is gender fluid, will just simply be someone that is viewed as energetically sophisticated. Maybe a little more energetically sophisticated because she's able to flow. You know, I think there's going to come a place when we're looking at it like that it's not just our bodies, it's also the energy flow, the unique pattern of energy flow that each person has.
Well, I wanted to just put a couple more points in here. It came out recently that Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's daughter, Shiloh, is now decided to live her life male, and I think she's only 8 years old. So this decision can be made by children. They know who they are, despite what genitals they're born with. And I studied this with Dr. Mickey Diamond back in 1993 when I moved to Hawaii, at the University of Hawaii. He had a free class, and he was talking about the surgery that is done, and we mentioned that earlier. And it's done often, when they're infants. So he was proposing that they wait till the child is of age before this decision is made, and that would eliminate a lot of trauma. But that means that society would have to accept these children that haven't declared their gender. And then the last thing I'll add is that earlier, DeAnna, you said that one case where the woman or the person had 4 children, but she was really ex-wife.
Yes.
That would be an argument for having same-sex marriage legalized universally, because we have all these genders. So why are we're denying these people happiness and loving who they love, and they just maybe had children to this man. So this is incredible. Okay, someone else. Dr. Leslie, what would you like to say? We'll kind of go around Robert here. Are you there, sweetheart?
I'm what I was asking for now that we have Tracy back, so you can understand where we're all coming from, is the miracle of this wonderful tantric temple, how you got into it, and what happened with it, and what its future is.
Right, and we'll tie all this together. Tantra is the energy, and we're talking about the energy of the genders themselves. So back to Tracy. Good transition. Go ahead.
Right. If we focus on what this topic of energy, the human being experiencing energy, then it definitely all hangs together. And I guess it brings the question, why would the church, and I'll just say the church, and it can be any church you want to fill in unless you happen to belong to a Tantra temple, but so many of the churches turn us away from our bodies, away from sexuality, sexual expression. They turn us away from that. Well, when you begin to do deliberate conscious energy practices like Tantra and yoga, and you become aware of energy flowing, and you become aware, wow, I could deliberately send my energy to someone, or I could consciously be open to receiving their energy. And for some reason, the church has really steered us away from our energy and light, and they've steered us away from these ancient teachings which would amplify energy and light. What's up with that? You don't think there's an agenda, do you? You guys don't think there's an agenda to keep us powerless? You don't think that's not
Not on Revolution Radio. We would never think such a thing on Revolution Radio. Well, let's look at that agenda. Tantra is not recognized, globally or internationally, legally, quote unquote. But it's the original spiritual practice going back to the Anunnaki and pre-Sumerian. What's with that? Who wants to talk about that? Tracy, you want to address that issue?
Well, that seems like if you go pre-Sumerian and Anunnaki, Dr. Sasha should address that.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll just say one thing from the goddess, that the most ancient relics that people track on show the creator as the feminine, which makes sense because the body comes out of the female body. Like anyone's body comes out of the female body. So the concept of goddess has been around a very long time. And then there's been a changing over of that, and it's a more sophisticated, I don't know, God-goddess impression. It's not just a god, it's not just a goddess, it's both, which brings us back around to DeAnna, the original tantric. I mean, she's living tantra in her body. And so, to me, I guess a theme is, why is being energetically sophisticated and energetically aware, why would that be frowned upon by hierarchical structures? Because we all have energy and light, so why wouldn't we cultivate that? Why wouldn't we? And so I don't know. That's
I'll say a little bit about the history. In the city of Uruk, which Inanna ruled on behalf of Yahweh or Enlil, they had wonderful tantric temples, not at all unlike that of the Phoenix Goddess Temple. And people were very happy in this town. Everybody had sexual and emotional, social loving, and it was an accepted practice. If a person was too untamed, they would have a tantrika, a specialist, tame them and humanize them. And when Inanna got her fief in the Indus Valley, she put tantric temples at Jolivara and Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. And there's been this tradition. Of course, the patriarchy tries to diss the contribution of the great geneticist Nimma, who worked in a team with her nephew Ningishita and Enki, the scientist, and it was Nimma and her co-wife Damkina that actually bore our ancestors when the Anunnaki adapted their genome to Earth to make the slaves that we initially were created as. So all this comes down to a resurgence of the kind of revival and freedom of the from the patriarchal religions that Tracy has made available to us in the wonderful goddess spirituality that she created in the Tantra Temple. And I'm glad to say that the American Indians have embraced the hands-on touching and the chakra education, and Tracy is a part of that wonderful movement, and we have been. She has been vindicated that the temple is not at all a criminal act, but is a wonderful act of contribution to our evolution.
Well, isn't Tantra, and you ladies can address this, Tantra is a transcendental enlightenment practice. Can you perhaps explain to our listeners how that works, how you can transcend your skin-encapsulated self-sense and actually remember who you are as a spiritual being, as a being that exists and doesn't die, et cetera, et cetera. Can you, either of you, explain that to our listeners a little bit more?
Yes, Tracy, do it.
Oh, you invited me. Okay. Dive in, huh? Well, what I'd like to share with everyone is something that I call self-evident Tantra teachings. They're things that you already know and you've already experienced, but a good Tantra guide will be pointing you towards yourself and what you already know and help you remember things. So the first thing that I like to begin with that's a self-evident thing is that everyone has in their solar plexus a ball of light. And the ancient Latin, if you go to that part of your body, and if you remember biology class from high school, The solar plexus is, it's the bottom of your rib cage, and then there's kind of a warm spot, like a couple, just one rib up. And right in there is a radiant ball of light. And they've taken pictures of it now. They use a radioisotope, I believe it is, to take pictures of humans at the speed of light. And when they take a picture of you at the speed of light, of anybody, what it looks like is it's the outline of your body, the shape of you, and that looks like stars. It looks like the cosmos. It's a dark pattern filled with millions or billions of little bright bits of light. So it looks like a starry cosmos, shaped like you. But at the center of it, in the solar plexus, there is a little sun, S-U-N. And the ancient Latin solar plexus actually refers to sun at the center. And so I thought it was interesting that the ancients named this part of our body solar plexus, sun at the center, when they did not have a radioisotope machine to take a picture of it and know that it's there. And what I realized is you can feel it. That's why they did that in the ancient world. They named it that way. Because if you slow down and you get real quiet with yourself, your body, your energy, you can feel a ball of light that is actually in your solar plexus. And when you tune in to that ball of light, you're now in a soulful, eternal place. If people are interested in this, a couple of really important books for me was Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav. And that's a layperson's explanation of quantum physics and the human life body and the light at the center of the solar plexus. That's a great bit of work. And then Deepak Chopra's work was the first thing I ever read about what he calls the human mechanical body, the quantum body. And he says, I call it quantum because it's the quantum field, the field of light, and I refer to it as mechanical because it's that predictable what it does. And I went, whoa, what does the light do that's that predictable that you call it mechanical? And something that intrigued me when I was first on my tantric path was in Deepak Chopra's book. I believe it was Quantum Health was the name of the book. But he talked about how he went searching for why some people heal from disease and other people, no matter what you do to save them, do not get better. And other people recover quickly or easily or even instantly like a miracle. I knew a man in Fairbanks, Alaska, where I grew up, and it was quite famous when it happened because we were a small town and everybody knew this gentleman, and he laughed his way out of cancer in about a 6-month period. He stayed home and did nothing but watch funny movies, and he feels that he healed himself by laughing his way out of cancer, but that's a different story. But going back to Deepak, what he did, Deepak Chopra is of the Brahmin caste, and that means that his family, for generations back, are scientists and scholars and priests, spiritual people. It's a high caste. Brahmins are the highest caste. They're named after grandfather Brahman, the creator of the universe. So Deepak Chopra's family has been doing Ayurvedic medicine for generations and generations back. And he has this ancient mystical perception of the body. And then he goes and gets an MD over in America. I think it was from Harvard. Now he's got a scientific Western medical education along with his ancient Ayurvedic practices about the body. And I remember it just struck me so much because he was a young doctor, really strongly practicing in a couple of lineages. And he said he wanted to find out why some people healed and other people didn't. So they began to study at the cellular level, and the people who healed and the people who didn't heal had the same exact biology. They couldn't find any differences. Then they went inside the cells of the body to look at the molecules, and the molecular patterns and structures of the people who got better were nothing different than those of the people who didn't make it. And then they went inside the molecules, and again, the atoms at the atomic level, that frequency, that speed, they were looking at the human life and trying to compare those who get better, those who don't get better. Deepak's looking for any kind of pattern that would indicate why some people heal and making comparisons. And again, they're not finding it. So then they go from the molecular level, they go inside the protons, electrons, and neutrons to look at the quarks and leptons, antiquarks and antileptons. Now, all this time, you're looking at light energy in a polarized manner, meaning it's an alternating current. There's inflow, outflow, inflow, outflow. When you go from the level of quarks and leptons to the fastest thing, which is the quantum field, and you've got now the particles of light, the quanta, and then you've got the background, which is the not quanta. It's the darkness that the little sparkling diamond bits of light are floating against this dark background. Now you've got light and not light, and that's duality. It doesn't have polarity. There's no charge. At that stage of light, you have light and dark, but there's no charge. Then at the next slower frequency of the quarks and leptons, antiquarks and antileptons, the light moves from duality, light and dark, to polarity. And for the rest of the levels of play, we have polarity. And that's important to remember that. Every level that we exist at is polarity. But going back to the quantum field, so now Deepak has not been able to find any markers, right? And what he did find is that every level, we are always exchanging. At the molecular level, at the atomic level, at the cellular level, we're replicating. We're always rebuilding ourselves, and we're always exchanging with the universe, always. We're very fluid. We seem solid, but we're actually fluid. And so now he's looking at humans at the speed of light, and he's looking at that little ball of light that they've taken pictures of that is at the center of everyone's solar plexus. And he said, as far as I can tell, this was his, and please forgive me, I shouldn't be telling this story when I haven't read the book in 20 years or something, but this is what I remember. And
you're doing great.
This is what struck me, okay, just as the reader.
Okay.
And you always get a different experience if you read Deepak's work. But this was when I first began to be interested in the human light body. And so he said, as far as we can tell, and then Gary Zukav's book, A Seat of the Soul, confirms this. As far as we can tell, that little ball of light that's at the center of your soul is the only part of you that does not change. It's the only part of you that does not change. So when you are sitting with yourself in that ball of light that is within your rib cage, because there's a ball of light there, and if you're just real quiet, you can feel it. You're radiating. Everybody does, right there, right under that lower breastbone, right at the bottom there. You've got some light and some heat right there. And so what the teaching is, what Deepak brought away from that, he said, there's something going on in that ball of light that allows some people to get better with or without medical treatment or intervention, miraculously, instantly, or over a long period of chemotherapy, whatever, but they get better. Whereas other people, no matter what you do for them, they still die. Right. And he said, the only thing we can tell is it must be something to do with that ball of light, because everything else is fluid and changeable.
So that ball of light is the soul? The soul.
Well, yeah. I mean, what these great minds are describing it as, what the ancient Latin for it is the S-O-L, the S-O-U-L. So the soul is the soul within you. You have a ball of light, and so that's something I want everyone to think about when we talk about energy and light, because if you can sit with that ball of light, that is the you that is unchanging. That is the part that is impervious. And they're not even sure that that's the soul. The soul could be faster, and as Gary Zukav purports, that's not the soul. That's probably where the soul sits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, fascinating.
So to get into this, now we're talking about the human beings at the speed of light. Now when we jump over and talk about chakras, now we say, okay, there's some scientific research about the human light body. Yes, we exist at the speed of light. So now when we look at these very ancient teachings from many lands that describe these vortexes in the body, and animals have them, and people have them, and I'm sure fish have them too. Anything that's alive, this is how we are exchanging energy with the universe. So a self-evident teaching in energetic tantra is this, that everything that is alive is by definition plugged into the web of life. And conversely, anything that we would describe as being alive could also be described as dead. Like a rock is not alive because a rock cannot be dead, okay? But everything that is... Are you guys tracking with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So,
yeah? Okay. So the first self-evident thing about Tantra, because Tantra means to weave, and what we're weaving is energy. The first self-evident teaching is that everything that's alive has channels where energy's flowing in and other channels where energy's flowing out. That's all. And the chakras describe these channels so that we can consciously work with the energetic exchange that we have. And if you have weak connectors, weak places where you're taking in weakly, or maybe you're sending weakly, your channels of flow are not strong, or maybe they're blasting too strong in some places. So that's what we're talking. We're talking about a living being, and by definition, living is connected to the web of life, exchanging energy in, out, in, out. And see, because if any living being becomes disconnected from the web, then the light of the soul, which is fast, leaves the body, and the body then goes back to being, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The body goes back to decay and become part of the earth, right? So there's a separation. So as long as we're alive, we are children of heaven and earth. We have heaven in us and the energy and light of heaven in us, but we're also made of this earth. So that's the first self-evident teaching, though, is that living things are plugged in and that we have channels and we can become aware of those channels. And the second self-evident teaching is that an orgasm is an energy event. And in these ancient religions, orgasms were meant to strengthen your ka. Your ka is your personal matrix of light. Everybody has their own unique pattern of energy flow, how you're exchanging life force with the universe. Energy's flowing in massively at the base of everybody's spine. So, and I read one scientific, and I've got to find it, but it was 70% is what they're saying. About 70% of your bioenergy is flowing in at the base of your spine. And we all remember from science class that, your spine is an electrical column. So massive amounts of bioenergy from the web of life is going in at the base of your spine and then traveling up your spine to be distributed through your body. So when we speak of the chakra system, there are 6 major energy centers in the body, and the root has massive amounts of power. It's where the soul connects to the earth plane, and it's where the body is sort of plugged in. Like if the human body was a major appliance, the big grape cord would be coming out at the base of the spine. Because that's where massive amounts of amperage is going into the body to move the appliance around. We take energy in right there. Now, here's where it gets sexy and interesting. This is the Tantra. Because we live in a universe that has this duality and this polarity, if you were born in a male body, you take energy in from the universe at the base of your spine, but the way your soul translates it, in the root, you flow out. But if you were born in a female body, female soul, the way the energy is translated in the body, when you take energy in at the base of your spine, ladies, you then create an earthing vortex that actually is a magnetic negative that pulls and grounds and earths all the way to the center of the earth. That's what these Egyptian teachings have. That, and I can't speak for people who are transgendered. They're going to have to come out with their own information. I'm only able to speak to kind of the basic stuff, which is
DeAnna
the
basic.
I'm going to address the basic male-female, but I know for a fact that within gay and lesbian couples, you will generally see someone who's kind of running the masculine energy settings, and you'll see another partner kind of running the feminine settings. And then, of course, they get energetically sophisticated, and they will switch it up in each moment, girlfriend. You know, there's those people, too, who are super gender fluid, which is basically...
Well, let's DeAnna address that, and then we'll come back to Tracy.
Yes,
DeAnna,
good segue to DeAnna. Good segue to DeAnna.
Good transition, yeah. Take it away, DeAnna.
So the term that's been really powerful for me lately is gender fluid, and energetically, I would say that same term applies. And I would say, depending on who I'm with, I am like a chameleon almost, would be a good analogy, in that I can shift the energy on how it flows to emulate whoever I'm with. So where, as Tracy's talking about, the binary kind of male-female system, you're right, this is a more sophisticated thing where I can adjust and I can flow out in ways that, depending on who I'm with, I can flow differently. And I think that probably is probably as sophisticated as you want to get into, but it depends, hour to hour, day to day, kind of moods and stuff like that. For me, it's way more. It's more fluid. It's just more fluid. I can do that. I can transmute and turn into something else in some ways. So.
What about the chakra system? We've noticed that there are many different chakra systems, and Tracy uses one. What does what would you suggest, like a transgendered or someone that has what's the intersex person? How would they adjust the chakra system for their practice if they were engaged in contact?
Can I address something? Because when DeAnna said, now I want to say that heterosexual people can be energetically sophisticated. I don't want to make it appear that they cannot. When you practice Tantra for a while, I believe that the goal, regardless of what energetic label people might want to put on you, the goal is to be able to send and receive, both send forth energy and receive deeply energy in all 6 of your chakra centers, your main centers that go through the core of your body. And so regardless of your gender or whatever, if you're a sophisticated energy practitioner, you will get to the place where you can send and receive in all of your centers, and you can do so fluidly in the moment. If you Tantra practitioners, when they're with each other as lovers, they will frequently shift back and forth within the moment. They will be shifting and flickering, yeah, because that's a more sophisticated, playful way of doing it. But I was wanting to address for people who are just beginning to play with this concept of these 6 major energy centers called the chakras. It just means spinning wheels. And ladies and gents, the 7th one is above the head. And if you've ever been in church, you've seen a picture of the crown chakra, because most of the religious iconography will show saints, people who are healers, mystics, with light glowing around their head. And that's the crown chakra, the 7th chakra, which does not permeate the body. It's connected to the 6 chakras, but it's not in the body. It floats above. But we have 6 in the body that are either sending or receiving at all times. And take it away, DeAnna.
Well, I would just say, first of all, Tracy's got way more experience at this and can really articulate it from that level a lot better. But I know when I'm with a seeker or whatever, I tend to intuitively just try to balance chakras. I try to like flow where they need to be, where they need inflow. And then I try to receive their outflow wherever they're outflowing. And so I think in some ways being transgendered allows me some more flexibilities than the traditional, the polar system of male and female. So it actually makes me, in some ways, at least intuitively, and it gives me an advantage to some extent because I have outflowed and I have inflowed in all the different chakras. And I think, like Tracy says, is right, where you get to, I think a practitioner who is had a lot of experience can start to do the same thing. Whereas what I do is more instinctual, and I think as I practice more and more, I'll be more deliberate. But right now, I intuitively try to sense where people need inflow and where I need to receive their outflow. So,
I would like to add that it's not just something the chakra system. You can look at the split within yourself and center yourself at each level. So at the first chakra, at the level of your vulnerability or inner child, you have both a vulnerability and the parts of you that protect your vulnerability. And when you center yourself, you can decide how much you want to share of your emotions and how much you want to keep them private. And in the second or sexual chakra, and all of the chakras, you have that opportunity. For example, in the heart chakra, you have the giving of love and the receiving of love. And if you can center yourself where you can give and receive, and you're not rather than having to always give or always receive, but rather be at choice. And so when you have achieved balance at each of your chakras, you can sense not only your own energy, but you can sense other people's energies. And you can see where they're closing down. For example, it might be fine if in the power chakra to do business with them, but you don't want to do your sexual chakra, so you keep that blocked off. And once you understand the chakra system in your own system, you can totally center yourself rather than be automatic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, we have a couple minutes before the break at the top of the hour. Who would like to speak, and what would you like to address?
Well, it might be fun for everyone listening to try a polarity experiment during the break. Basically, hold your hands in front of yourself and palms up. And basically, one of your hands is an outflow hand by default, and one of your hands then tends to be inflow. Basically, the hand you write with, your pencil hand, is the outflow hand, and then the other hand is your inflow. Now, basically, I want everyone to just try this. We'll just deal with the second and the third. So, guys and gals, you're going to get different instructions because remember, men and women flow differently in the chakras. Ladies, take your receiving hand, not the hand you write with, the other hand, and place your left thumb in your belly button and just place your hand, the center of your palm, right over your belly, just like you're pregnant and waiting for that baby. I love that feeling. Place your hand right on your belly, and you've got your received hand on your outflow chakra, and then take your right hand and place it right on your solar plexus, what we were talking about before, lower part of your rib cage. Guys, you're going to do the opposite thing while we're on the break. Take your receive hand and place the hand that you do not write with on your solar plexus, and then place the hand you write with, your pencil hand, on your belly, which is your thumb in your belly button, and then spanning down so that your palm is over your own belly. This is really what you're doing right now, is you're creating a circuit within yourself. You're sending your own energy back into yourself. I mean, one of the big Egyptian concepts is this looping of energy. Okay.
Tracy, I'm sorry, we're going to have to pause that exercise.
That's it, yes.
We'll be back in 5 minutes, so thank you very much.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
Oscar's briefs. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows a secret.
The heart's beating fast. Even a little out of your brain. The neurobiological system keeps telling it to run. But your ears to whisper. Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of a future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is mere insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting with danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution Radio!
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angel. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, she'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be Talking with Your Angel.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com. People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I'm your host, Janet Lesson, with Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we have our very special guests, Tracy Elise and DeAnna Bennett. And we're talking about Tantra and human sexuality and gender and transgender people. And Dr. Lesson, are you with us? You back? Okay, I can't hear you. Not sure what's going on. David, could you see if you can get Dr. Lesson back on?
Aloha, can you hear me?
There we can hear you. Okay, good.
Okay, so with breath abate, I'm waiting to hear the history of the goddess temple, how it was created, why it was created, and what's happened to it, and where it's going.
Really?
All right.
Okay.
So Sasha wants to hear the update on that, and okay, take it away, and then we'll go back to DeAnna for some more things on questions I have for her.
Okay. Well, when this first began, the issue where the government challenged our very existence, I believed in the Constitution. I had a Perry Mason sort of perspective of the legal system. I don't know. I was just naive, really. I'm just going to say that. I lived in the temple, for the temple. It would even be fair to say that I lived in cloister, that I was that cut off from the world. I didn't really watch the media or anything. So when this happened, when we were so horribly attacked at a physical level by the government, I don't know, my peace of mind was very shattered. I felt my biggest distress was that the Constitution wasn't real. Like I couldn't believe that. And it still is, the way it looks is, the Constitution is at best an instrument of negotiation. I'm going to say if you're strong enough, you can get somewhere with it. But everybody listening, don't take your constitutional rights for granted. They're sort of, I would just describe them as a person who's clinging to them and wanting to use them in my situation with the government in court. It's not like we think. Until you have to use your constitutional rights, it's you just think that you can.
Tracy, what were you doing at the temple? How did it function, and what behaviors did the government engage in when they interfered with you? People don't know that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, there's of course a sacred sexuality movement. It's been going on for I think 30 years or more in the United States, and there was quite a large pod of people practicing in Phoenix, Tucson, and Sedona. So in Arizona, there were, in particular, I would say there were 3 men. Baba Des Nichols practicing in Sedona, Harley Swifter practicing Kadoshka in Phoenix, and then Ray Stubbs doing his wonderful work in Tucson. So there's this really interesting triad of men practicing Tantra for promoting it and practicing for quite a while. And I really fell in love with the lens, so I moved to Arizona to sort of really bring the goddess aspect alive, and I've always been wanting to be in school. So we had an esoteric mystery school called School of One, and then we had the Phoenix Goddess Temple, which was a place where women embodied various aspects of the divine feminine, and men would come and learn from the sacred feminine wisdom, and women were viewed as healers in our temple, and men learned healing. But as with the Native American church, there's a certain true wisdom in that women are natural healers because we create the body within our body. And so our body-to-body wisdom is quite strong. And that's an orange ray thing, too. The chakras, that's an orange ray thing. But the temple, the temple existed to teach holy anointing. We were doing holy anointing ceremonies. Everybody at the temple in Phoenix was practicing ladder of light technology, I guess I'd call it, but we were all practicing a chakra-centered form of Tantra, magnetic energy exchange. And because it involved the roots, because we went ahead and dealt with the whole system, which is, as I said, there's 6 major energy centers in the body, almost like snowman buttons. They're just right down the center. If you want to find them, if listeners want to find them, the ancient teaching on these wheels is that it's your thumb to your pinky. If you open up your thumb and your pinky wide, that's the size of the diameter of your major wheels, your wheels of light. And basically you have 6 of those that run up your body, and each one is major. And so we were teaching all chakra tantra, and of course that's the name of the lessons church, is all chakra tantra. And so we were doing all chakra tantra in Phoenix, but because we included the red ray, because we included sexuality, because we treated the body as the sacred vessel for the soul, we did the holy anointing in the ancient traditions, and the government chose to view that as prostitution, and which to this day astonishes me, but anyway. And then it turned out it was very political, and it was actually very traceable to a Catholic filter, which doesn't really surprise me. And the politics aspect of that is that in April of 2010, the Vatican issued Senatus Gravitas, the list of the most grave sins. And this was in response to 10 years of public outcry over the pedophilia problem that was, had come to light. And so they finally, and I think 10 years might be really fast for the Vatican. I don't know, but they had put out this, it wasn't really written down anywhere that it's wrong for priests to have sex with children. So they needed to write it down. And one of our expert witnesses in our case, Dr. Ted McElvenna, who is a religious expert witness, he said that the age of consent for sex in the Catholic Church is 12, and that it has been for over 1,000 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting side note, although I'm sure they wouldn't talk about it. And you can't really blame them, because 1,000 years ago our lifespans were much shorter, so perhaps it looked different then. But anyway, Senatus Gravitas, April of 2010, the cardinals, the bishops, and the pope, they put out that it's the most grave sin for a cardinal, for a priest to have sex with a child. And while we're at it, everybody, it's the most grave sin to attempt to ordain women in spiritual authority. And so, yeah, they did that. They put it on the same list with pedophilia. Now, that year, the Phoenix Goddess Temple was starting its 3rd cycle. Mystic Sisters were having their 3rd cycle of priestess ordination, where we train women, and then Wayne Clayton was actually doing divine union ordination, which was for couples, and it was a slightly different, but still chakra-centered ordination program that included men. But we had a priestess program that was Mystic Sisters priestess path, and so we did that in 2010. The Phoenix Goddess Temple joyfully, very happily, we had our first full cycle of priestess trainings, priestess initiations, and the first group, the Daughters of the Divine Root, graduated as priestesses of the Phoenix Goddess Temple in December of 2010. Now, also happening in 2010, there was a vice cop by the name of James Gallagher part of the Phoenix Police Department, and he was bent on a more humane approach to busting prostitutes. And so he had this program that he created called Project Rose, and they were going to take they were planning to take in 2010. He was planning this project, and then he brought it into being in 2011. And what the project does is they take 100 police officers. That's more than Vice probably has. 100 cops in a 24-hour period, and they go out and they literally hunt women for a 24-hour period. And they're hunting them for looking like prostitutes, having an ad, somewhere that looks like prostitution, whatever. And they just round women up. They set them up and accuse them, and then they bring them in a squad car in pink handcuffs. I shit you not. I'm sorry, that was my father coming through. That was my father. Quiet, Carl. My dad. But that's what they do. They bring them in pink handcuffs to the a church that's rented. Now, the Catholic Church doesn't want all these accused prostitutes actually at the Catholic Church, so they rent this other church that's an independent Bible church, and they need the money. So they take all the women to this church and say, if you sign up for this Catholic program called Dignity, we'll drop the charges against you if you complete this Catholic program. And if you don't complete the program, we're taking you straight to jail. And if the women ask to see a lawyer, they're told that they can't see a lawyer. They have to make this decision without talking to a lawyer.
Oh, my God.
So anyway, so this was being designed and planned. In the same year that we were doing Priestess Pass, the police department in the city of Phoenix was designing this sweep thing called Project Rose. Now you're in 2011, and I don't know what to say. I'm married in a Catholic church. My children are half Catholic. I just think that institutions, large, lumbering, old institutions, are slow to change. And so I'm going to just do my best to grant some forgiveness for all this. But the Catholic Church has a terrible attitude towards women and equality with women. They just do, and they have had for a really long time. And I would just say that the Catholic Church contributed to what happened to the temple, because then in January of 11, a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Hayes, who I believe is Catholic, and I don't know. That particular thing is hearsay, but it looked like it. It was a website that I don't know the source of completely. So, but it just looks like this. There's a lot of Catholic influence in the city of Phoenix. There's a lot of hierarchical structure here, and this gentleman gave an interview about the Phoenix Goddess Temple where he speculated that we were a business dressed up as a church. And he said this to a reporter who then turned around and printed it. And because he was a city attorney, this became fact. I didn't really understand, and everyone listening needs to know this. If you're accused of something in the press, you'd better go out of your way to, we did an attempt to get a retraction, and we did a number of things to try to get people to retract what they said and did, but we didn't succeed. We weren't powerful. We could have picketed. In retrospect, I wish we'd have picketed the Phoenix New Times. Because if somebody says something about you publicly, and then you don't refute it in the public record, it's almost like it becomes fact. It becomes fact about you.
Wow.
And so that launched this investigation. The Phoenix New Times did a story. In that story also, they accused us of doing sex therapy without training or licensure. Now, we never claimed to be sex therapists. That was the angle that writer chose to take. And she also chose to characterize me as crazy when I said that, when she asked me by whose authority I was doing these things, I said, it's my relationship with the Creator on high, the Most High Creator or whatever. And she just, it was interesting because when the whole thing was said and done, that reporter was an atheist And it was interesting because she told me she was. So how was she going to look at what we were doing at the temple? Her highest authority was the 5th chakra, and that would be like a psychologist, and the sec czar for the city of Phoenix. So she went to visible secular authorities and said, what do you think about these people? What do you think about these people? She went to the 5th ray, because as an atheist, she couldn't go any higher. She went to the blue ray of truth. She didn't have a higher power. She doesn't believe in a higher power. Now, what would people who are religious, how would they view what we were doing? Even very spiritual people may look at what we were doing and not understand that the body is sacred, and that there are ancient practices where women convey peace, knowledge, self-knowledge, the ability to control and direct. We empower our men when we embrace them. And, in the ancient world, men and women would travel to these temples to learn the art of love and to learn the art of deliberate energy transference. And so, anyway, this is what we were doing. We were doing energy balancing, holy anointing, and we did.
Tracy, I'd like everyone to know that the Goddess Temple did not charge anyone anything. There was no charge for the services of being healed.
Right. It was set up as a donation, and it's true that most people gave something close to the requested amount. However, when we get into the research that we were doing about this, when I talked to other ministers, rabbis, and priests, it's quite common for clergy to, yes, they pass a collective basket when there's a group service, but when it comes to individual ceremonies like weddings, funerals, baptisms, communions, those types of things, bris ceremony, the circumcision of the baby boy, those things, those one-on-one personal family ceremonies, quite frequently, almost always, there's a requested offering of support for the ceremonial as a celebrant's time. And so it's not, we were doing nothing different, nothing wrong, but we were receiving offerings. And basically they just, everyone that took a plea bargain, people that haven't followed the case, most of our people, it's been, we're in our 4th year since this happened to the temple. One of the tactics that they will do is delay justice to deny justice. So by dragging it out, people one by one give up. They just want to get on with their lives. There are 5 of us out of 40 that are still going forward, defending the temple, defending these practices. There were 11 people who took a plea bargain where they actually took a felony, a Class 6. It's the lowest level of felony. But basically every single person that took a plea bargain, all they ever took a guilty plea for was that they gave money to the church. They were all accused of giving money to the church. And then they characterized the church as an illegal enterprise.
Okay.
And
I would just I would really like you to say how traumatic and horrible the arrest was, and how it hurt people, and how they were tortured by the tent city and machinations of the state of Arizona and Sheriff Arpaio here in this awful city. I think it might be
fun. It might be fun for DeAnna to pick this up, because DeAnna actually had just begun coming to the temple. She was in the priestess path. She was attending practitioner trainings, but she hadn't decided to. You can be a practitioner without doing it as your right livelihood. You can practice with your beloved, and that's all you do is practice with your beloved. You don't practice with other people. But DeAnna had just begun to come to the temple when this all happened, and so she heard from many women, myself included. She saw the trauma. And DeAnna, what do you want? Do you want to talk about the trauma? You saw it.
Yeah, no, I would love to talk about it. I met my boyfriend at the temple at one of the classes, my current boyfriend, and we've been together for like 4 years. There was just so much wonderful energy. Actually, it helped me walk away from other religious things I was doing at the time, but it was like when I got to the temple, I felt like I had gotten home. I was home. This is where I needed to be. And so I remember the day of the temple raid. I remember it. And I was driving by and I thought, oh my God, hopefully somebody just, I hate to say it like that, but I was hoping that somebody had some sort of a medical emergency or something. That's why all the police cars and everything were there. I mean, I just felt I was enraged. I was no more enraged than if my Methodist church or my Catholic church would have had the police storming the gates with battering rams and guns drawn. No, there was nothing in that place that was any more. I've never been to as beautiful a place or felt as connected to a church in my entire life. And I have gone to church all my life, and I have been in many congregations. I had never felt so connected to a church before as I had to the temple. And it was sexy. It was fun. It was so connecting. And for the first time, because of the gender and the different things I've been through, one of the things that most transgender people never really do is connect back into their sexuality. And the church had really healed me of that. The temple had really allowed me to step back into who I was as a woman, and was really, really facilitating that. And I have trauma still from the way the church was attacked. And I never ever viewed it as any way or shape or form as being any kind of an illegal place or a place that shouldn't be. It was really the government really weaved the story, and I have never in my life, I've been very much in what we call the matrix. I've been in the military. I was in the military for 13 years. So I was very much in that mentality of the government is always right. And so for the very first time in my life, I questioned this. How can this possibly happen? How can this possibly happen? And to watch the way the government and the press portrayed the church, it really revealed to me for the very first time in my life what we are fed as a human race, as a country. It's a very manufactured thing, and it's manufactured by belief systems and everything else that the people in power want us to believe. And so for the very first time in my life, I had all that question, in many ways, had the rug pulled out from underneath my feet about what I thought was real and what I felt was authentic in the whole world, not just here in Phoenix, but in my whole concept of what was good and what was bad. I always viewed the Christian church the way the Christians view it, as a kind of under siege, and that they were a really good place, and I wanted my kids to be raised there. But when that happened, it pretty much eliminated all those belief systems in me. And I began to really, really resent, and I was very angry, enraged. I literally didn't know what to do. And when I started getting calls that say, can you do one thing or another to help the girls or the women that were in the temple that had been arrested, immediately jumped right on board and said, I will do anything.
And men were arrested too. There were several men too, right?
Yep. Yes, that's
men
true.
And women.
So the first thing I did was help with some of the personal belongings of some of the goddesses and stuff. I began to do that. And then I got the opportunity to, when Tracy finally was given an opportunity to get out, she needed an address. And I willingly jumped on board, and even against some of the objections of people in my family and different places were concerned. I mean, it was like this weird thing. I did give her a home, but it was so weird because I knew who Tracy was, and I had known her for not as close as I know her now, but I had known her, and I knew what she did was good. And it was so strange to have everybody in my support system and different places, and even close friends that would laugh at what I was doing and question me deeply. You really sure you'd want to do this? Are you really sure you want to take on the government? And it very powerfully, deep in my soul, I knew I needed to do this. And I really didn't have any fear. And I still don't have any fear, because when you're right, it doesn't matter what happens. It really doesn't matter and that was a hard thing for me to get my head around, because the government has guns and they have structure and they have scary people and they have really powerful people who believe what they're doing is right too. And so it's very strange to run into this mass of structure that believes what they're doing is right. And yet I know fundamentally at my core that they're wrong. And that's so odd. I've never had that happen in my life before, where I've run like into the government or into a wall of reality in some ways, some people would say, where everyone's perception is one thing. And I happen to, by happenstance, and because of a very, in some ways, short journey, this all happened within a year. I went to Janet and Sasha's school, and I began to do other things. And all within a year, I got to the temple. I met my boyfriend. I got real active in the temple. I started doing the priestess path. All this happened within a 6-month period. And literally, my world went upside down. It changed. It changed drastically. And, I was just outraged because it was my church. And I think anybody on the planet who would have their place of worship rated the way my church was rated would be horrified. We used to talk about in the Christian church, what would happen? There was one of my favorite stories I would hear was a Russian story about what happened in Russia, where these house churches would be raided, and what they would do to weed out the milk toast, so to speak, believers, is they would do these pretend raids with look-like soldiers, and they would come in with guns, and they would question everybody, and they would say, well, if you just agree never to do this again, we will let you go. And then they would let a few people go, until finally just the hardcore, the believers of the strongest people were left. And then they would lock the door, and then they would be like, okay, we know now who to form our church with. And in many ways, we just went through that with our temple. And we know who to build our temple with. And it's the ones that are not going to be shaken by a government entity or the military or a political
system. Well, and this is where
system.
It's a perfect spot to talk about oneness, because there is this whole discussion of a new one world order, one world government, one world monetary system, and our practices actually do seek a type of oneness. And so, and as with everything in creation, there's the light and the shadow. Oneness for planet Earth could be beautiful and peaceful. Oneness for planet Earth could be despotic and horrible. And so I guess just bringing that around to where we're at with, sharing the light at this time. There's so much, we didn't really get to bring in ETs. I think you were going to bring in everything. But this thing,
we will.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but the temples, I believe, are poised to reopen as medicine wheels, and so this is good news. Before all this happened, before the raids happened, before the government came against us and said that we were no more a church than Cuba is Fantasy Island, that's what the prosecutor, Bill Montgomery, said to the public. And they also tried to strip us of our language, by the way. And I will say that going through this, the first year I waited for them to just look at the evidence and let us go. And at the end of the first year, I found out that they hadn't even begun to look at what was on the 15 church computers and personal computers that they'd taken from people. After 13 months, they hadn't even looked at the computers. So, and yet they said they had 100,000 pages of what's called discovery. So I learned all these different things about how our system works, and I think rather than go, there will be I think videos and maybe a book forthcoming describing the experience, but focusing on the positive going forward. What we all are sharing in common is this interest in life, this interest in energy healing, and we've been given this really beautiful opportunity to work with the Native American Church. And the Native American Church was founded before Congress in 1918 to preserve indigenous culture, and so it represents the oldest continuous spiritual tradition as practiced on this continent. And so we're part of that. We're under that umbrella. Sasha and Janet's temple are also part of that system of this really old church that is an earth-based church, and we pray Mother Earth, Father Sky. And this really suits with the chakra teachings, and actually the Hopi have chakra teachings, and the Mayans do, and the Egyptians, the Tibetans, the Hindu, I'm trying to think who are they now, the Koreans, and
the Buddhists.
Even the book of Revelations refers to prepare your 7 lamps, trim your wicks, fill your lamps with oil, and be ready for when Jesus comes back. Prepare your 7 lamps, let them shine brightly. So there's a lot of, I think, possibility right now for us to, in terms of where we can be on the ground, I think there's a beautiful opportunity for us to continue with our work on the sovereign soil of the Native Americans. And I think that's what we're working on right now. And then we won't be offending local law, which will just be on soil, because that's what the Native American reservations are. They're like countries within a country. And so that's what we're working on. And within that, we're going to be doing, elemental healing. We will be doing light body and holy anointing, hands-on healing. I think, yes, Tantra, various forms of shamanism, sacred smoking will be taught. I can envision blanket ceremonies, which are marriage ceremonies happening. I can envision maybe even a very careful, fastidious return of a sweat lodge so that more people can experience it. You know, a lot of people in the Native American church or in the indigenous culture, there are some of those people who are very upset that there are elders such as ours who are seeking to share Native American ceremony with people of other races. And yet what's interesting is the Hopi and the Lakota have a prophecy that at this time, the time we're in right now, it is the changing of the world, that there will be a new nation called the Rainbow Nation or the Rainbow Warriors. And rainbow because people will come from all walks of life, all ethnicities, all stations of life, to come together and form this new rainbow tribe, which will we will heal one another, and we will steward and heal the planet. And so what we're seeking to do with our medicine wheel, which I think is our best and most direct thing that we can do right now to get going with our medicine, I think that's where we're at. And what these prophecies talk about, if we've got a minute, I just want to say they're very interesting, is that at this time, the 4 races of man, and they're described as red, yellow, black, and white. And it's interesting because the Egyptians also use the 4 colors as the races of man, red, white, black, and yellow. And that at this time, we're to stand in a sacred hoop. Humanity is to join in a sacred hoop, and that teachings of the element of air are to come from the yellow people, which is, I guess, the Asian folks, and teachings of the water are to come from the Africans, that's the black people, the dark-skinned people, and that teachings of the earth how to live in harmony with the earth come from the red people, which the Native Americans are representative of that, and then teachings of fire from the white people. The Caucasian people are the bringers of fire. And that we're to stand in a sacred hoop as humanity stands in one sacred hoop, and that if we can do this and share our teachings with one another, that we will mitigate whatever difficulties the earth will have rebirthing herself. But that if we can't share our knowledge and stand together in this sacred circle, that there'll be much more suffering when the earth transitions fully into this next stage. So it's very interesting stuff. And so if people ask, I love the goddess and I love Tantra, I'm going to very much focus for the next year or so on the Native American church and forming these medicine wheels and kind of working with this idea of the sacred hoop. And just to sort of wrap up what's happening with those cases, those cases where the churches were accused. The church in Sedona was also accused of wrongdoing, and we lost everything. And so if listeners hear this tonight, or if you hear a replay at some point in the future, what I recommend is going to mothermedicinewheel.org, and then you can click on a tab that will say Temple Union. And Temple Union will have all the updates of what's happening with the legal. At times we might be asking for your help to sign a petition or something. But right now it's funny because what they've done is so wrong and so bad, and what we've done is so right and pure that it's kind of over. Without actually having a trial, it's over. And so we've got to negotiate a settlement, and I just want to negotiate the settlement and get on with it. And the issues where the government is unhappy with the practices of a group of people, spiritual people, there's been many battle spots, and these things have been shook out in high places. How does the government react when somebody wants to handle rattlesnakes? And that's their religious thing, is that they can handle rattlesnakes, right? Or what about the people who are doing ayahuasca and they're doing these trippy journey medicines? Or what about, here's a specific one, what about the Jehovah's Witnesses, how they don't like to do blood transfusions? It's a real critical one, and it actually leads to what's happening for our church in the future. How the government likes to deal with the masses, they need to label you. They need to understand who you are and label you so that then the machine can kick in and interact with you if necessary. Now, I got mislabeled, and we're going to work on that. I got mislabeled by the machine. But everybody gets labeled by the government. We all get labeled teacher, activist, whatever. They're going to label you. And but through our actions, I just keep wanting to bring around that we can, with love and patience, through our actions, just really bring that change, the kind of change that Gandhi brought, the kind of change that Martin Luther King brought, the kind of change that the suffragettes brought. And notice how the women worked as a group, and we don't name any one. Isn't that interesting? So, but change happens slowly with bureaucracies. And so what we have going for us is the government has this card holder system. So, for example, in the Jehovah's Witnesses, if you want to not have a blood transfusion and you're at the hospital, and the hospital administrator who is sworn to save your life and use every possible means to save your life and keep your life in your body, and they want to take those measures, and let's say they're talking about your child who is 12 years old, and now the parent, the Jehovah's Witness parent, is saying, I don't want a blood transfusion, and the hospital administrator is saying, oh yes, we have to do this, your child could die. Well, the way it has shook down with the government in court is that if you have pre-declared what your religious position is, then the hospital may then opt out if you're standing there with a card that says, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, we don't do blood transfusions, when the car accident happens and your daughter needs that transfusion, that hospital administrator will back down if you're holding that card, because that card is their legal, court-approved way out of their vow to save your daughter's life. What I found out about all this stuff is the government tracks the stuff down to the hard place. And legal is about tracking it all the way to the hard place where it doesn't wiggle or move anymore. As, you know, they're trying to get it where it doesn't wiggle, because then they can track it. That's really what this is all about. So when we talk about how the government might tolerate tantra temples, might tolerate sweat lodges and shamanic circles and people doing journey medicine together, people even sitting in a circle and smoking cannabis together in a prayer pipe. How they're going to tolerate this is, A, we're going to set it aside and do it on the res, because that's a sovereign nation and all the local and state laws don't apply. Your city, your county, and your state laws don't apply to the res. And so then you don't have conflict. They don't actually have to change anything in their structure, their hierarchy, if we operate on res land. So that's a win-win for them, because they don't have to change anything. Now, technically, any land that's held by our church is under Native American control, and so even our temples, which were not on res land, should have been protected under the Constitution. So that has yet to play out. But we know that going on the res land is going to be acceptable, that would be a super easy solution. And we also know that when we are doing things off the sovereign nations, if we're out in the world doing things, that our government will tolerate it in a more specific manner. And this is true with peyote. It's true with the blood transfusion. They just want you to declare it before there's a conflict, and so then they know who you are. And it's kind of weird, because you're like, yeah, then they're marking all the medical marijuana people. They're like, yeah, they're marking me. I smoke marijuana. Or people who, you know, whatever, we get different kinds of licenses. We're always being categorized by the government. We just are. Mm-hmm. So that's the solution, is that we will end up being card holders, and that we'll be able to do these sensitive, esoteric, highly spiritual ceremonies that involve orgasmic energy, and that they will transpire between members of the church and not with members of the public. And that's kind of what the government wants. They want us to pull back and not offer these healing ceremonies directly to the public. But if we offer them to people who have joined the church, then they can really say nothing. So that's kind of where it's at. That's the teachings that I've gotten from our elders, who have really invested quite a bit in taking a stand and to have the capacity to give peyote to non-Native Americans. They went all the way to the 10th Circuit Court to be able to do that. And that's what's shaken out time and time again, is this card holder system. We can talk about it or not, but that's the wrap-up on the legal. Expect good things, expect things to reopen this year, and expect to see probably some kind of card holder system, because that's already pre-approved. We don't have to fight for that, but that's already there. And there's some surprises too. We're also suing for damages, so watch for that. And anyone who wants to be in support of that, it looks like what we're going to have to do, Janet and Sasha, I don't know if DeAnna's heard this, but, you know, there's various statutes of limitation, and we're now in our 4th year. It'll be a 4-year anniversary, September 7th of 2015 is a 4-year anniversary. And the way these things go is they have statutes of limitations. And so even as we're still undergoing the harm of being accused, etc., without resolution in our 4th year, if they don't resolve it, they will have run out the clock on my ability to sue them. And technically, and technically they don't have to respond to my lawsuit if I have criminal charges against me. They don't have to respond until the criminal charges are settled. So if they can run the clock out before they drop the criminal charges, they basically protect themselves from having to pay damages. And that's really, I think, what's happening right now. But to the last little piece, then we can do a much more friendly wrap-up. It's not fun to talk legal unless you're a legal animal, so to speak, in which case it is interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, I just forgot we were talking about. I was thinking about sharks. Go ahead. Cards and where we're going with the lawsuit. We have to do what's called class action. And class action has a 4-year statute of limitations. So we can go after the city, the county, the state, and the Catholic diocese for these types of crimes against our church and conspiracy to keep medicine people, priestesses, shamans, whole body healers, magnetic touch therapists from their workplace. They kept us from our workplace. And so, that's real. And so we are asking the Attorney General, the new Attorney General, to work with us to get conflict resolution. There's just a lot of really fun and cool things happening. And so I guess, we could put updates on your website so people, don't have to track to see where it's at. But things are just going really well for us. And I expect the goddess and Tantra, those ideas, to continue to permeate the culture. And how I'm going to contribute to that, and DeAnna is as well, we're going to work on videos that we're uploading to the web. And so for a while, some Tantra and goddess we'll be putting up on the web so that people can share it that way. And eventually we'll get our temples back on the ground where we can openly worship the feminine. It's really interesting because they did. They couldn't stand that we were worshiping the mother. They really couldn't stand that, I guess.
Right. It's very patriarchal system.
Yeah, it was very offensive to them, I guess, that we were worshiping the mother in that way. It's very...
I wanted to go back to DeAnna here before we run out of time. It's 47 for the hour. DeAnna, are you there?
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay. What advice do you have for people who are contemplating your path, who are in one gender and feel they are another? And I'm sure that leads to a lot of conflict, and sometimes people even contemplate suicide or do it. And so what advice do you have for the person that's wanting to come out and explore this?
I would say that, it's very individual thing, and it takes, people have to do what they have to do. But I think it's very interesting. I just like to point out that there's some very interesting cases right now where little kids are at their first moment of communication at 1.5, 2 years old. Their first words that they say to their parents are, "I boy, I girl." These are the first words out of their mouth because they're wearing the wrong clothes. It's so critical to understand that these are not things that kids just dream up. These are things that inherently they know deep in their soul. And as the minute they can articulate that, and this was my case too. Most transgender people know very early in their lives that there's something mixed up. They don't always know what it is, but they do know that something's mixed up. And so I would say as somebody who's actually gone down this journey and tried to make it work, it never works. It never really works. It gets stronger. It gets harder as time goes on. People think that as they get older, it's going to get better. It's going to go away, but it doesn't. And what becomes even more apparent, I think, as time goes on, is that you're not living authentically. You're not living an authentic life. And to me, nothing in life matters more than authentically being who we are. Everything else is a facade. And even this stuff with the temple, even this stuff is authentically being who I am. I have always felt compelled, even if I think back on it, people ask me about this stuff, and I would have always said I'm a very sexual person, but I just was a little confused. But speaking from I have had 2 lovers commit suicide, and I know how devastating this can be for someone. We still have an incredible.
Did they commit suicide because they were transgendered, or is that the issue?
That's a good question, but mainly I think people commit suicide because they don't have the tools they need to be able to, first of all, accept who they are. They're in extremely difficult situations. You know, we still have such resistance. I spoke at a college 6 months ago, and a practitioner came down, a medical practitioner came down, told me a story of a very, very, very beautiful Hispanic girl who at 15 had suffered cancer and had beaten cancer at 15 years old. And after successfully going into remission, she told her parents that life was too short and that she needed to tell them that she was a boy. And they had stuck with her through cancer. They loved her through everything. But when she said, "I'm a boy," they turned around and walked away. Can you imagine?
Wow.
A parent that would do that? They had nowhere to put her. They were trying to find housing for her, trying to figure out how to do this. But for whatever reason, people walk away from this problem. And it's as inherent as when a baby is born, you know, the first words everybody asks are, is it a boy or is it a girl? And what we're finding with the intersex stuff is that more and more people are saying, let these kids grow up, for God's sake, and let them tell you who they are. And so that's a big push. So it's gotten more complex. It's getting better. It's getting better for people because there's more acceptance. There's more understanding. Before it was a scary proposition. When I first began to transition, the words that people said to me over and over again were, if they were accepting of me, were, "We are so afraid for you. We're so afraid for you." And I would say, like, don't be afraid for me. You know, celebrate me. Help me to embrace this part of myself instead of terrorizing me with these kind of words. But these kids, there's still a lot of resistance. And especially, I would say, especially for the male to females. And it can go both ways. I totally see that. But we do live in a patriarchy. We do live in a patriarchal world. And so the view is always, for the male that wants to become a female, it's always, why would you want to leave the club? Why would you want to leave the club? Why? Because everybody comes at it from a rational point of view. And so it's not rational, though. People just don't get it. It's not rational. It's intuitive. It's like embracing who you truly are. So there's a lot of hope for the kids. There's a lot of these things. But here in Phoenix, we have a really good program for trans youth. And it's growing. But these kids are thrown away. They are really thrown away. And there have to be programs instituted. There's recently been a young teenager who took his life at 17. And it was ugly because the parents would not accept it. And the reason given was it doesn't, our belief system, our religious belief system does not allow us to accept our kid this way. And so the kid took his life. And when the reason people take their lives, whether they're GBLT, any which way, shape, or form, is because they don't feel like they have any choices left. They've run out of choices, and it's time to eject from this plane. It's time to go. And it's devastating that happens.
1 minute left, and I want to make sure that you mention your book. You have a new book out. And
I have a new book. I have a new book about my journey, but mainly it's about questions that have been asked of me over the last 15 years that I've spoken at colleges, and I've spoken all over the place for the last 15 years. The book is called Born This Way. It's by me, DeAnna Bennett. You can find it on Amazon.com. I actually have a CreateSpace link that I haven't gotten figured out yet, but it'll eventually be available in soft copy too. And so, but it tells a little bit of my story too, but mainly it's about the 100 and some questions that I've been asked over and over again about what it is to be transgendered and how do you transition. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It's literally about every aspect of transitioning. So
fascinating.
Thanks for letting me pitch my book.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening, Tracy. Our music's coming any second now. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. And
thank you for having me. It's always fun.
Yep.
MotherMedicineWheel.org. And click on Temple Union. Oh, it's 58. My producer gave us the wrong time. Okay, we have 2 minutes left. Popcorn, who wants to say something?
You know, I just think it's amazing. I don't know. The whole Tantra, the medicine wheel, all these things are so powerful. And if we don't ever let that stuff back into our realm of reality, you know, we are going to be in a worse place someday, much worse place.
Yeah.
We need to let the ancient wisdom come through. We have got to allow it back into our realm on this planet, in our rational thought plane. All this stuff is just emerging. It's just emerging. And some of it is learned, but a lot of it is just intuitively becoming known. And when we can embrace that, that's going to be an amazing opportunity for the human race to become more enlightened and loving on the planet. So
all these practices are ancient.
Yes.
They were with us in the beginning, and we need to embrace them because that's the core. That's the core of humanity.
And part of that is being authentic. Yeah, being authentic.
That's what we were talking about, living an authentic life and being who you are and being happy and proud.
Absolutely.
Of who you are and expressing that in the world and creating a planet where we have the freedom to do that. And I think we have finished. Everybody say aloha.
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 Thank you so much
for joining us.
Aloha.